Welcome, everybody, to the Inner Carnivore Podcast. My special guest today, Emma Zangenberg. Before I get in with her, whether you guys are streaming this on your favorite podcast streaming platform or watching the full video on YouTube, do a huge favor, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share it with a friend. It helps more than you guys know, and I appreciate it every single time you guys do that. So jumping right in, how are you, Emma?
Pretty good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Dealing with the heat here in Arizona. It is now over 100, and it probably won't be under 100 until September.
Oh, that's horrible. I'm in SoCal, so it's a little chilly right now. It was like 70 this morning.
Yeah, it won't get under 70 for probably 3 months.
Oh,
the
no.
low is 70 here.
That's horrible. I'm so sorry. I don't know. I don't know if I could handle that.
It's not too bad. I actually don't mind it at all. 100 is balmy now. It's okay, this is kind of nice.
Are you able to spend a lot of time outside still when it's hot like that? Do you still go on walks, or do you kind of have to focus on indoor activities?
Up until noon, right? Up until noon, you can hang out outside. You can hang out in the evening, it's nice. Once it gets into the heat of the summer, then it starts to, you have to kind of back it off a little bit, but it's no different than being in the winter of somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
I can hang out outside all day in the winter. Here in the summer is just when you kind of have it restricted. But
yeah.
Anyway,
true.
I digress. So we linked up on Instagram and talked a little bit about your story. How did you get into this way eating? Because you're based mostly animal based, correct?
Yeah, I do 100% animal based.
Okay. How did you get started with that?
Yeah. So, oh wow, this is quite the story. So my whole life I had cystic acne, just horrible. I had PCOS, terrible cramping, body pain, fatigue. I thought I had ADHD. I really went through this roller coaster of weight fluctuations. I also was diagnosed with Hashimoto's when I was in high school, which if a lot of people might not know this, but Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disease of the thyroid. So actually, rather than a lot of thyroid diseases, you're either really low or you're very high, right? When you're thinking of something with high T4, T3, you're thinking Graves' disease or something like that. Whereas if it's low, you just have hypothyroidism, and you can just simply take a pill, right? Or a levothyroxine or something like that. So I kind of went through this, I didn't really know how to fix it. I didn't know what I was doing. My mom really thought doing vegan or going really plant-based would help me. So I kind of did that for not fully plant-based, but I really focused on trying to be what I thought was healthy. And my symptoms were just so horrible. The acne, especially, I just remember being so embarrassed and so insecure about it. So I think, yeah, that went on for a while until college, when I found a naturopath that I started shadowing because I was always really interested in pursuing medicine, and I love science. I'm such an immunology nerd. I actually graduate in June from UCI with a degree in immunology and microbiology, so I'm pretty excited about that. But yeah, kind of along that path, I found a naturopath that I started working under, and I remember going in on the first day thinking she's gonna think I'm silly because I'm not fully vegan, or I'm not doing this. And I remember walking into her office and initial conversation, I was oh, I know, you're going to tell me veganism is the best. And she literally laughed at me. She was what are you talking about? That's the absolute worst diet. And she's just so funny. She's actually a minority. And so from her background, their religion was always very plant-based. Everything was very, very plant-based. So she was telling me her life story of how she started to incorporate meat back into her diet. And it was just a very interesting moment. And I it literally rocked my whole world. I was what? Because my mom was always saying this, or my sisters are vegan and all these things. So I was wait, I'm so confused. And then actually immediately after, because I was I have so many problems. I thought I had Crohn's disease at a point. I just had a lot of issues going on. So I was I have nothing to lose. I'll do carnivore. I don't care. So I did carnivore for probably 6 months, where I was more of a strict carnivore, and I really used it as an elimination diet. And then I think I was just really struggling at that point too, like kind of dealing with like being like mentally weak at that point in my life. So I think when at the end of the point of my 6 months doing carnivore, I had a huge, like, my acne was gone. A lot of my symptoms of like Crohn's was gone. A lot of this is the craziest part. My Hashimoto's antibodies were completely gone. Like I no longer was like a patient that was positive for Hashimoto's, which was very interesting. So I technically reversed my autoimmune disease. And then, but like I was saying, I was kind of going through a lot like at that point in my life. So I actually stopped being carnivore and was like, oh, I'm fine now. Like I healed myself and kind of fell into this, like back into this Western diet of eating everything, not everything, but like just not having self-control really, and like binging or like falling back into it, which I feel like is so different because a lot of people's carnivore story is, I started immediately and I was perfect, but I don't know. My story was I just was dealing with a lot of stress at that point in my life. And like, yes, it helped me so much, but then I fell off and struggled and went through whatever. But I ended up kind of doing that 6 months or not 6 months, maybe like 3 months of falling off where I was like eating kind of whatever I want. I was eating gluten again. I was eating sugar, like all the junk, right? Maybe 3 or 4 months passes. I go get my blood work done. My Hashimoto's enzymes are back, which was like just a light went off. And I got kind of lucky at that point too, because now I had kind of joined this group at my church where I really had worked on my like mental weakness and really found God through that. And then, so then I kind of went back into my carnivore, back into my slight animal base, because I do add some fruit and dairy products. Yeah, that was like such a long story, but that's kind of
that's great because a lot of people struggle with this stuff and a lot of them end up vegan. Like, so from that aspect, why do you think so many people, because I've talked to numerous people that have had PCOS, thyroid issues, acne issues, autoimmune issues, Crohn's issues, and they get pushed plant-based. Maybe not full vegan. A lot of them end up full vegan, right? They kind of do this. Well, I started plant-based and it wasn't really working, so I might as well just go all in and go vegan.
Yeah.
Right? Why do you think that is? Is it a cultural thing? Like, have we been conditioned that we got to remove these foods? Is it a medical care system? Like, what do you think pushes these people, especially women, right? Like, especially women get pushed towards the vegan diet.
Yeah. You know what? Something that I think a lot of people don't talk about is with a vegan diet, you also can lose weight extremely quickly. When we're talking about like the reason why you're losing weight like that, you are losing weight from, like, for lack of better terms, almost malnutrition. So, because at the end of the day, you cannot break down the foods that you cannot get the micronutrients that you need from the plants the same way, say, like a cow can, right? Like a cow can go live its whole life and eat grass and eat this, but cows have multi-chambered stomachs and are able to fully ferment and have a much more diverse microbiome than we do. So like this is something we have to kind of take into account. And it's sad because I don't know where it really stems from. And I don't want to say that it's like doctors doing wrong, because at the end of the day, I know so many wonderful physicians that are really trying. It's not that they're lack of doing this or they're not knowledgeable, because I think we have a lot of brilliant physicians that are genuinely trying. But I mean, I think it comes down to just we didn't know, like they just didn't know enough. And so we're on this journey of kind of learning and more research is coming out and what was funded by who and what study is this. But, I love a lot of your posts. You talk a lot about funding on research papers, and they do have to put that at the bottom, like this little snippet of who paid for this research. And I think that stuff is really important, because a lot of people will blindly trust studies, but it's just not, science is just not that black and white. Like, as someone that works in research, and I mean, I'm nothing compared to my PI that I work under. I'm just an undergraduate researcher. So it's given me a lot of experience and a lot of opportunities to learn and like see the flaws in it. But you'd be shocked how easy it is to fake data. It's very easy. And luckily, 99% of science, or I think it's 98 to be exact, because I believe 2% of researchers admit to faking data. But 98%, they're really in it for the science and they love research and they genuinely want to help people. And I can say, like, I've seen that firsthand. The PI that I work under, a wonderful, wonderful human that genuinely wants to cure MS and like wants to figure that out. So it's just like, yeah, long-ended answer to that is I wish I knew exactly where it came from. And I think a lot of it also has to do with it being more problematic now, say, than like 20 years ago because of what our foods are sprayed with. So like, let's say you're eating something here versus you're eating in another country, you're not getting the same chemicals. So that's really sad too. But it's a slippery slope going down talking about the vegan diet.
For sure. And so it's really interesting you brought up about like your story with carnivore and coming off. And I honestly think your story is more akin to the average person who does carnivore than it seems, right? Like it's super easy on social media to be, I haven't eaten a vegetable in 6 years, or I've never touched a plant in the last 12 years, or I have not cheated in this long. And while that may be true, like there may be people out here that do that, the vast majority of people that's not true. Like they just don't do that. That's not realistic. And so people get this persona that, you know, all of these larger influencers are super strict and that they only eat what they show you that they eat when they do the what I eat in a day videos, right? It's part of why I don't do very many of them because it varies. Like I'll change it up. Like if I'm going to go out somewhere, you know, it might be planned out. I don't go very often, but I'm not the one that tells the server that I'm allergic to seed oils. Do I want to eat them? No. But I also understand that there's going to be certain circumstances where I'm just going to end up eating whatever. And 99% of the time, I'm going to be fine, right? As long as I don't continue down this road of, you know, like you said, like now it turns into 3 months of eating this way. And then all of a sudden you have problems. And you're like, ah, crap, I got to get back on the wagon. So I think that's much more realistic. And people will do carnivore,
Yeah.
have improvement in symptoms, and then go, I don't need it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then we realize that it's actually the foods that we're adding back in that are causing these issues.
Yeah, yeah. Something I regret not doing is really treating the carnivore diet as an elimination diet. And I just kind of wish I would have slowly reintroduced fruit. Because even now, like I still notice I have some type of insulin sensitivities, I think it is. Like if I have a few too many dates, like I actually still will break out. Or yeah, but it's this learning process. And I think her account is like Primal Bod on Instagram, something like that. But I love her post talking about like how fake even fruit is these days. Like it's such a sugar bomb. So it's such a slippery slope, like talking about all this stuff, because I don't want to post what I eat in the day all the time because I don't have all the answers. So I don't want to like inspire someone to eat, you know, a banana every day or this or that and like think, oh, that's okay if I'm doing carnivore and I have this, because I don't know how sensitive they are to insulin. I don't have their labs. And I'm also not a doctor, so I can't like tell someone exactly what to do. So yeah, 100% agree with you. It's hard to post that stuff and then like worry about who's seeing it and making sure you're putting across the correct information. And also like I don't want to oversell like I'm not trying to sell someone to do the carnivore diet. I genuinely want to help people find the healthiest diet for themselves. If that's carnivore, if that's animal based, amazing. But I can almost guarantee that it's not vegan.
Yeah, that's 100% truth. And people ask me all the time, like, well, is it okay to eat this? Is it okay to eat that?
Yeah.
It's okay to eat whatever you want. Like, at some point, you have to be an adult and like weigh the
Mm-hmm.
pros and cons, right? Do I love cheesecake? Absolutely. Right? Is it good for me to eat cheesecake every day? No. So
Yeah.
I need to like, am I going to eat cheesecake? I don't eat it very often. Once in a great while, I'll eat it, and that's okay. But you know, and my take on carnivore is I didn't do carnivore out of necessity. I started animal based and then just kept removing foods because I kept feeling better. So I'm like, okay, like I feel good doing this. What happens if I cut down the fruit a little bit more? Okay, I feel better. What happens if I cut fruit out completely? Well, I feel even better. So I'm like, okay. So people will go, well, you're scared of vegetables or you're scared of fruit. I'm like, No, I just feel better. Like, it's literally that simple. Like, I feel best eating this way, so I do it. Now, should everyone do it? No. Do I think everybody should try it? Most people, I do. Because it gives you a whole different perspective. Like, I would consider myself very healthy in my 20s, and I feel way better than I ever did. Like, it's a whole different world when you actually remove all
Wow.
of this
Yeah.
stuff. And I think everybody should play around with it. Like, the
Yeah.
worst that happens is you do it for a month, you hate it, and you don't do it again. People have done way worse
Yeah.
stuff for a month.
That's so true. And people are scared of it, which I understand like the initial hesitation, because I think even when I started, like I really trusted this, well, LDL cholesterol and like you're going to get heart disease, you're going to get this or that. And so I was hesitant myself. But then, yeah, I was so lucky meeting Dr. Kaur when I did, because she really kind of like assured me, like, haven't seen that happen at all. Like, not one patient. I have so many patients that do this or that, and you're going to be fine. And even when I was on animal based, or not animal based, when I was on full carnivore, my cholesterol was perfect. So I think that's like another fun topic to go down, because cholesterol is not as simple as you eat it and it goes into your arteries. And like that's just, it's such a sad, disgusting oversimplification of such a beautifully complex biological system that, I mean, like you have to shake your head and laugh a little bit, because it's like, what? And then I love that one post that you have talking about the funding of one of the top publications in that field.
Yeah, like that's it. That's gold standard. Every single person will reference that. And the amount of people, so it's about to hit 2 million views now, so it's gone kind of crazy. But the amount of people in there defending that study. Well, who do you think pays for research? I'm like, okay. Like, I have a sports medicine degree. Like, I have some experience in being able to look at a research paper. First of all, these are opinions. Like, that's literally the definition of a consensus statement. A group of people got together, looked at research, gave an opinion. So yeah, it is pertinent on who is paying them. But the number of people that do that. But then you get into the fact that most people have no idea about cholesterol, right? Like, they're like, oh, my cholesterol levels. And you're like, okay, well, what's cholesterol? They're like, well, my HDL and my LDL. Okay, well, do you know that HDL and LDL are not actually cholesterol? Well, what are you talking about? It's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. And you're like, okay. And like, I have rudimentary knowledge of cholesterol. Like, I am bottom of the barrel in the amount. Like, I looked up a couple things and I read a book, right? Like, I am not a lipidologist. I'm not a cardiologist. I don't. But people have to understand that there's a huge difference between cholesterol and the different types of lipoproteins that carry cholesterol. And like, it's mind-boggling to me. So as someone with a background in microbiology and research, what is your take on cholesterol, right? Like, how do you view cholesterol and the different substrates of lipoprotein and how it plays into someone's health?
Yeah. I wish I could really give you a thorough, in-depth biochemical answer to this question, but it's so incredibly complex that I think that I would be like overstepping my knowledge even. And I've taken a few classes like going into this, and I've talked to a lot of professors about this. But I think it's hard to even say, because I mean, we're even talking about hormones. Like, hormones are cholesterol based. We synthesize our own cholesterol when we need it. Like, villainizing cholesterol to the way, or even like in your like bilayer of your cell membrane, there's cholesterol in the membrane. Like, why is there cholesterol there? Because you need it to make sure you're in this homeostatic. Basically, like, if you're in too cold of weather, you would freeze without cholesterol, or you would just, it keeps everything stable in your cells. So I wish I had like the best answer for this question, but I just think it's sad how villainized it is. I think a lot of it does come down to funding. But going back like to that, talking about research, I think that that's a few studies that do that, where they have pharmaceutical companies with money in like LDL cholesterol lowering drugs that fund research like that. Most PIs, most professors working in that stuff don't want a conflict of interest, because that's what that is. At the end of the day, that is a conflict of interest, and they have to list that at the bottom of the paper. it's surprising to me that it's not talked about more often. And I'm like, personally, I know like the PI I work under wouldn't want something like that on his paper, because it does kind of like undermine the work that goes into it, and you just start to like hesitate, right? Like as anyone, like I didn't even realize, I didn't read, I have read that paper before, but I didn't look at the conflict of interest. Why? Because you have to scroll all the way down to the bottom and get all nitty gritty about it. And like, I like to get nitty gritty about the science. Like, I didn't even think about that. So it's just absolutely crazy.
Well, that's what was crazy is I thought it was common knowledge. Like I discovered that like 6 months prior to doing the video. And part of the problem is, for anybody who looks up, like, so you Google that, right? The European Atherosclerosis Society consensus statement. And the first thing that pops up is it takes you to a PubMed where it just shows you the abstract, right? And you read the abstract, and the abstract has nothing in it, like no data, it just says, hey, we came to this conclusion based on blah, 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 blah. And 95% of people don't go past that. If you do go past to it, then you have to find a full link article, which usually it's available. Like usually it's pretty accessible on the PubMed. But then, like you said, you have to go down and you have to go all the way to the bottom. But then even then, it's still not clear. Outside of like Pfizer and Merck, most people aren't going to recognize these people's names. Like most people don't know who Novo Nordisk is, or AstraZeneca, or Amgen, right? Like you look at these and they go, okay, like it's just some random company. But then you have to like do some digging, and then you have to like do this, and you're like, wait a minute. All of these have lipid-lowering drugs. And most people are like, so what? Like that doesn't say, I'm like, the literal consensus statement says that we should be using LDL lowering therapy, aka take statins. And like there's some PCK9 inhibitors and that kind of stuff. But that's why it's a problem. Like it's literally saying take drugs. And people are like, well, I don't see why that's a problem. I'm like, maybe it's not. It is. I am not in the position to tell that these people are corrupt, but it makes you go,
something's
and then
funky.
you start to look like a little bit further into it, and it, like you said, it's the demonization of cholesterol, which is utterly essential. Like literally every cell in our body needs cholesterol.
Yep. Crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy, and it's so villainized, and it's so sad to make people so scared of something that is, I mean, essentially healthy. And yeah, and the oversimplification too is so sad. I think that it's just, I can't even I don't know. Well, I wish that there were better studies talking more about that too. But I think again, it's like that conflict of interest. Like no one wants to go into that because maybe someone's not going to fund it, or like whatever the issues are. But kind of like going off on a tangent on the same subject, there's a professor at UCI named Dr. Kong, and she does a lot of she is literally a cancer biologist. And all of her research is on ketogenic diets and the microenvironment of cell-prolific tumors. And I want to say it's in mice still right now, but the papers are crazy. Like the information that she's finding alone and like talking to her, absolutely brilliant. But yeah, they're finding great success with using a ketogenic diet to treat cancer patients.
Which like is great. Like the villainization of keto. Like I clump in this category, I clump keto in with carnivore, right? Like the purist will be like, oh my gosh, it's different. But at the end of the day, it's like a prioritization of fats with a reduction of carbs. That's the simplistic. But there's so many papers coming out. Like, yeah, like work on cancer, work on autoimmune issues, work on mental issues. Like, I mean, it was developed for mental issues and seizures, right? So it's crazy to me that so many people villainize it, which then leads me back. Is that how it is in the nutrition field? Like, so you go to class, right? Like you take all these courses. Is keto talked about? Is it villainized? Is it, or is like nutrition kind of this long lost, we don't talk about it that much?
Nutrition gets like one day. I feel like in all the physiology, biochemical, like, I mean, granted, I haven't taken an exact nutrition course, but we got like one day talking about it. And then even so, like going into it, it's like, you need to eat bread, you need to eat grains, you need to eat this and this and this and this and this. And then it's like the bottom is like eating meat. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. Why? And then there's not even like reasoning behind, oh, well, you're going to get heart disease. Like that's the only connection. That's like an empty statement. So I wish that they taught more about it. And I guess I would have been nice if I took more electives going down that field, but I've always been like really in my immunology game, like on my immunology grind. So I think I focus more on that, but I wish I would have taken more classes in nutrition. It just like C too.
Well, it always makes me wonder, because I can find, so actually I'll have a video that I post next week where I have a PhD in nutrition who says fake meat's better for you than animal meat. And I'm like, he's a vegan. But then you have a PhD in nutrition on the other aspect that's like, all of the studies are conflated, and you can find different studies for everything on red meat specifically, and I don't think it's a problem. And part of me goes, how can we get to the literal upper echelon of education and have such polar opposite views on a science, right? Like I understand that nutrition science is like new and we're learning stuff all the time, and the amount that we know is pretty little. But that's like one physicist coming out and saying, I think gravity exists, and the other one goes, I don't. And you're like, how do we get such polar opposites when we all come up through the same education program?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I find a little bit of beauty in that, because I think it is interesting to find such unique individuals throughout everything, where we can kind of like go down whatever creative path in science. The hard part is when people start vocalizing things that are not really backed up by their own studies. Like, let's say that vegan, or even on the other, like someone like maybe pushing too much for one side or the other. It just becomes kind of politicized, which is sad in itself. But I think the cool thing about science is you can kind of follow whatever passion, whatever like niche you're really interested in, which gives like, that's one thing that like really leads way to these distinct differentiations, right? So I think that can be, there's beauty in it, but also it's sad that people are spewing things like they're facts when like Beyond Meat with what, 40 ingredients, 60 ingredients. Like, come on, like we do have to use some common sense. Like, you can have a PhD, but if you don't have common sense, I'm kind of concerned.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. How has animal-based played into your studies in immunology?
Okay, I love this question. So, you know what I'm really interested in, I've really been going down a rabbit hole about right lately, is this topic of autophagy. And you're talking about your own cells. Hold on, let me give a little background first. So autophagy is this, a lot of people think that you can get into this phase when you're fasting, which takes about 4 days, when your cells begin to eat it's like they engulf bad cells, right? And then like break down and reuse parts. So this is this concept of autophagy. And a lot of people are talking about autophagy being linked to anti-cancer, anti-autoimmune disease. And I don't have any evidence yet to back this up, but I'm thinking that there has to be some connection between this animal-based diet and this change in, because I mean, metabolically, you just change when you switch the diet, whether like, you can't even deny that, because the weight you lose, the energy change you feel, like something changes. So I think that that's going to be a really interesting like topic to study, and going into this path of like, what is it that's causing this switch? Actually, the research lab that I work in, which is a multiple sclerosis lab, and I have to be brief about this because legally I'm not allowed to say certain things, but it's very interesting because we are going down a similar path where we look at mitochondrial membrane potential in mice that are immune to autoimmune diseases and mice that develop severe symptoms. So, and we see a distinct shift in the biochemical changes within these cells. So whether they're doing more oxidative phosphorylation or they're doing less oxidative phosphorylation, it's just very interesting. Even like lipid accumulation changes within these cells. And something that's interesting on these is, I mean, granted, these are genetically modified mice, so it's a little different, and they're mice, so it's not really like comparable to humans. But I think that it's going to be really fascinating, like thing to go down. And yeah, just reading about autophagy in general, it is a rabbit hole to go down.
Because that's a buzzword, right? Like autophagy is a huge buzzword that everybody talks about. So talk a little bit more about how long it takes to get into autophagy and the benefits that you can get based on diet.
So this is hard because I really don't feel that I'm an expert in this exact field. I would love to actually reach out to my PI and talk to him about it because he's an expert in autophagy. Well, a lot of things. He's just a brilliant immunologist. But basically, the media consensus and the few papers that I've seen is it takes about 4 days to get into the state of autophagy. And for mice, I think it's 48 hours. So humans is much longer. And then supposedly at this state, you're just completely like shedding, but like you're engulfing these bad cells or you're cleaning it up, right? So when you're talking about your immune system, you have certain cells called macrophages that'll go through your cells and like, okay, this is expressing something bad, engulfed, and break it down and reuse it. We also have T cells that will go through and say, oh, like the human immune system is absolutely so cool. So like you have your cells, right? They'll have little receptors on the surface of the cell that will express what proteins are like highly available within the cell. So let's say it's virally infected. Then it's going to take some type of protein that is from that virus, express it on the surface of the cell. And then these T cells can go, oh, that's not good. Send the cell into apoptosis, which is so magical and like it's so cool. But yeah, this is all really interesting stuff because when you're talking about autophagy, there's a lot of like signaling that goes on, and it's like incredibly complex, and like the changes in mitochondrial membrane potential and changes in what you're using as energy, and then going into like Warburg effect, which is also really popular to talk about, especially in this community, which is when commonly seen in tumor microenvironments, you have these tumors are very wasteful, right? So they're using sugar, doing a bunch of glycolysis for ATP. But when you're biochem, like the basics of biochem, 2 seconds, I'm definitely not a biochemist, but I'll like explain this the best way I can. So you have glycolysis, which will produce like very limited ATP. Like I think it's 4 or 2, like net is 2, but it's been a while since I've looked at this. And then you also have like oxidative phosphorylation, which produces like much higher amounts, but you have to go through the Krebs cycle that's happening in the mitochondria. So it's like this more complex thing. But these tumors, which was discovered by that Warburg, I believe he also won a Nobel, not I believe, he did win a Nobel Prize for this work, but he noticed that these tumors are very wasteful. They're doing a bunch of glycolysis and using glucose just rapidly. So I think a lot of like these studies were hoping to limit glucose to these tumors and then hoping to see that the tumors would regress. I think that's what Dr. Kong tries to talk a lot about too at UCI. Yeah, it's just very interesting. I hope that was like easily digestible and I didn't ramble too much.
No, that's perfect. So when people talk about getting into autophagy, is it something that, based on the current research, that fasting is beneficial for, or is it something that like the human body kind of takes care of? Because what somebody will hear is, oh my gosh, I need to fast for a week so my body can go through autophagy and I basically become a brand new human. Okay. I think I lost your... Yep, there you go now.
Okay, sorry about that. I clicked off.
You're good.
So from what I've read, I'm not sold. However, I haven't read every single paper and my knowledge is limited on the subject. So I wouldn't like trust my word for it. I would say continue doing research, I hope more PIs will look into this. And PI, principal investigators, these are the research like head honcho at universities that are getting top funding and they run research labs. Okay, then you have like postdocs, graduate students, and undergrads that also work in the lab, and that's kind of like the hierarchy. So when I say PI, that's what I'm referring to. But I hope that more people will take on this topic, but it's also a hard thing to get funded for because there's not as much money in, oh, you can just fast to cure it? Well, that's not going to make them any money. Like, I don't know who's going to want to pay for that. Probably not the pharmaceutical companies. So hopefully, like, we'll get more information. I would say I personally won't be fasting for 4 days. I'm going to trust my immune system, and I stop eating at like 6 o'clock and I start eating at 8 a.m. Also, I think that's also different for men and women when you're fasting and doing type of intermittent fasting things. It's much more like, it's very complex also. Like, for women, I'd say I would avoid fasting like that unless you're maybe like really struggling with weight.
Oh, no, for sure. It's interesting you bring up the funding. How big of a struggle is getting funding for research? Because that's the biggest one, right? Like, where's your carnivore research? Where's your long-term carnivore research? I'm like, well, first of all, long-term is like, we got to be like 20 years from now. But there's also this issue of funding and who's going to fund research on carnivore. So how big of an issue is that? And where does the majority of funding come from when you're looking at studies?
Well, this is so, I don't think I know all the, like, I'm not sure where all this funding is coming from or if it's coming from anywhere. I think a lot of times you get people that are just like good-hearted Samaritans that start like certain funds or certain research things, and then invest like $10 million or $20 million into this because of a loved one that had some certain disease. So like MS or ALS, something like that. So I think that sometimes is really well-intentioned. And then on the flip side, sometimes you have people that are pharmaceutical based. And then there's like a plethora of other things and places you can get funding. I, as an undergrad, don't really see any of that in my lab. Like that's very dealt with by my PI. So it's also different, like per university, per what section you're in. So like say you're in the sciences or like I'm actually not going to say where I work because I work somewhere where this certain center is more funded compared to another center in science. So like it just depends like what lab you're in, the status of the PI, the papers, like how are they winning prizes? Are they doing this? Are they giving talks? Like then they're going to get more exposure, more people are funding. So it's like it just dependent on your principal investigator.
All right, last question about studies, because I could literally talk about studies and all that kind of stuff forever because I feel, and again, like I have a rudimentary knowledge of it, but I feel so much faith is placed in studies, especially nutritional studies, that when I look at it from somebody who doesn't like have an extensive medical background, like I have enough, but I look at these epidemiological studies and these broad surveys and like the nurses study, right? Like the nurses study like has the data for so many nutritional studies. And all of these based on like FFQs, right? Which if anybody's following me, they've heard me talk about FFQs, food frequency questionnaire. What are, in your opinion, again, I'm not asking for an expert opinion, in your opinion, what are the hangups with how we currently do nutrition studies? And is there anything short-term, long-term on the horizon that can make these more reliable? Because right now, like in my estimation, again, this is my humble opinion, nutrition studies are like good for potentially developing hypotheses, which you can then test further. What's your take on it?
I think that kind of goes for all studies. Like most of us are looking to find something that can be tested further and like expanding your knowledge on. It's hard with these studies because, well, one, a lot of it's done in mice. You have to deal with ethics. You have to deal with, you can't lock people in some like room for a period amount of time and say like, eat this. And like, you can't do that, right? You have to like look at them over a long period of time. Like you don't know if they're cheating. You don't know if these people are lying to you. You don't know the genetic background. Like this is just a insanely complex topic. Like I feel like we can continue trying to study it, but I don't think we're going to really see like a distinct, this is the best study ever and this says full proof that this is true or this is not true. Like realistically, we're not going to get that because science is limited and like we have to do the best thing that we can right now, which is going to be like try to learn as we go and rely on intuition, rely on people we trust, and like look at results. Like if a bunch of people are doing one diet and you're watching them and their insulin is down, their A1C is down, they're losing weight like crazy, their autoimmune disease is healed, their acne's gone. Like that should turn your head and say, huh, that's interesting. Maybe I should try that. Versus like maybe another diet, they're not really seeing any good results. They're only losing weight. They're still doing this or that. They're like, Crohn's disease is still in full force, like, which is so sad. Like, that is such a sad disease. But I think that, yeah, there's not really one thing that we can do to know foolproof this is correct. We're going to have to rely on intuition and rely on trusting our gut and look at what we can see, which honestly, we're very lucky to have social media to be able to broadcast things and talk about different diets and hear from a lot of people. And sadly, I'm not saying you should base your whole life on just what social media says, but it's a good platform to spark curiosity and spark learning, whether it's off social media, which hopefully most of your learning is off social media, but it's good for sparking curiosity. And
yeah, I completely agree. And again, and I'm sure you hear this too, is it's anecdotal evidence. You shouldn't tell people about that. Okay, so again, this is, and people will be like, well, aren't you worried about colon cancer, or aren't you worried about heart disease? I love the colon cancer one, because the colon cancer one, they'll reference, I believe it's a 19% increase based on their observational study, which takes you to like 6%. Like, that's your absolute risk of colon cancer goes up to like 6%. And I'm like, okay. But exactly what you're saying, if I personally believe that our bodies are extremely intuitive, and whether you want to say that's how we're created or that's how we evolved, I don't care. I think we can get to the same place. Our body tells us when something's going wrong, and our body tells us when something's going right. And like you said, for me personally, so if inflammation goes down, joint pain goes down, psoriasis goes away, eczema becomes handled, acne goes away, digestive issues go down, energy improves, like sleep improves, all of these things across, like insulin's excellent, glucose is good, A1C is good, like all of these tangible things improve. I'm not going to stop because my risk based on a flawed study, like, which you said it, all nutritional studies are flawed, like, because my risk goes from 5% to 6%. Like, why would I do that? That makes absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah, I think it's a hard thing, because it's like, well, where do these, how do you decide? Like, where do you believe, or what do you believe? I think for me, I had to try it out myself. Figured out I feel good. My labs look good. And I'm much more worried about obesity and diabetes and getting like Alzheimer's or other autoimmune diseases from this standard American diet that is horrible than I am about even if that is 100% true and we have a potential 6% chance of getting colon cancer, which I kind of personally, I doubt from like intuition, but I don't have any studies to say that. Even if that's true, I would rather risk my odds with that versus the alternative, which is obesity, cancer, acne, PCOS, Crohn's, all these, like, the long list of diseases and things that come from eating the American diet. And we cannot turn our head continue turning our head the other way and acting like this. We don't have this I can't talk. We don't have this increasing cancer occurring in the States, like, and it's so much younger too. So not only are we having more incidents of young cancer used to be a disease of old people, but it's not the same. Young people are getting cancer. So it's like, what changed? And if we're really looking at what changed, we're looking at seed oils. We're looking at like insanely processed foods, sugars, additives, all these crazy things. So even if someone is like, I'm not sold, I don't want to do carnivore, I'm not doing this because you're worried about whatever, fine, don't do it. But please, for your own sake, cut out the crazy processed stuff. And you cannot tell me it's safe because you're just turning a blind eye. And maybe not all processed things are horrible, but enough to cut them all out. Like, most of them are really, really bad. And I mean, I'd argue that all of them are bad. But yeah, people love to go down that, like, love commenting on my pages. It's you're calling chemical, like everything is a chemical. I'm like, yeah, I am well aware that everything you're saying is a chemical, and like fruit, yeah, blah, 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 everything's a chemical. But when I'm trying to refer to, like, as chemicals here, I'm talking about the toxic stuff. I'm using like an Urban Dictionary definition of chemical. I'm talking about the toxic additives, sprays, chlorine. Like, why are they spraying chlorine at the grocery stores onto your foods in levels, even the CDC, which I'm hesitant to trust, even the CDC says it's too high, and you're still drinking it. Or when you're getting in a pool, filling your body with it, you're showering in it, and you're doing all these things. So it's like, at some point we kind of have to wake up and like use some intuition.
Well, that's the thing that I keep going back and forth with the other, fitness influencers on social media, is the thing I hate more than anything is the dose makes the poison. I'm like, okay, like I understand the spirit of that statement, right? Too much of anything can kill you, right? Like I get it. But the problem is we'll have the same people that get on there and then go, Diet Coke is okay for you. They're like, in these studies, you would have to drink 15 Diet Cokes a day to even get close to the level. So one of them, you're fine. I'm like, okay, like you can't look at how Diet Coke's made, right? You can't look at the stuff that's put in Diet Coke and look me in with a straight face and go, yes, it's good for you. And some of them do. But the problem is we've got this thing of moderation, right? Like it's in moderation. As long as you moderate, you can eat this donut, right? We got guys with 2 million followers eating donuts and being like, it's totally okay to eat donuts. I'm not saying you can't eat donuts. If you want to eat a donut. But don't try and pretend to people that the healthiest lifestyle that we can achieve is just making sure we're eating just a little bit of this stuff. It blows my mind.
Yeah, I think that's also how this food industry lures you in, because they have these hyper palatable, addictive foods. And like, just have little. Just have little. I'm sorry, like, do you know anyone that eats a serving size of Oreos? Because I know back in the day when I ate Oreos, I wasn't eating two. I was eating a whole sleeve. I was eating a whole sleeve with terrible acne, feeling bloated, doing this or that. And so, like, yeah, I would love, no, I'm not going to say that because that's not true. But, like, I think a lot of people would be like, I would love to eat this and this and this. But these foods are perfectly designed by brilliant people to be hyper palatable, addictive, and keep you buying them. They want to win. They want you. There is a competition of color, of rainbow, of sugar, of addiction. That's what they're selling you. And it's so sad because when someone's addicted to alcohol, you don't tell them you can just have a little. No one says that. No one says like, oh, you're addicted to heroin. Why don't you just do it in moderation? That would be crazy. That would be crazy to tell someone. But no, with sugar and with these processed foods that are highly, highly addictive. I believe I read a study recently saying that I'm going to quote all these and like send them to you so you can link them. But it was talking about mice had this opportunity to have cocaine or sugar. They were addicted to both. And then the mice were able to choose which one they wanted if they could only have one. Every single time the mouse chose the sugar. So sugar is more addictive in this processed form that we're eating it. We're not having it in this natural form where it's with a little bit of fiber and it's a little bit of this and that and like things that keep you satisfied. That's not how we're doing it. We're like foods like Oreos, frosting, donuts, blah, 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 blah. Like the list goes on and on. Gatorade, that one sickens me. We give children Red 40 salt water with a crap ton of sugar in it, and we're like, it's healthy. What? Like, that's mind-boggling.
Well, that's what's even worse is they then go further, right? Because then you have people who have millions of followers who go, you're not addicted to sugar. If you were, you'd be eating sugar out of a bag with a spoon.
So silly. So silly.
And I'm like, and I get like, yeah, the sugar thing is, I don't understand also because there's studies in adolescents where they gave them sweetened beverages. And then when they took the sweetened beverages away from them, they experienced all the symptoms that you would experience of withdrawal. And I'm like, okay, so I don't like do your biochemical definition of what addiction is and how addiction, I don't care. If you give somebody something consistently, right? I'm addicted to coffee. Like I can kick it, like I can get myself off of it if I wean myself off and stop drinking it. But if I don't drink coffee, I'm going to get a headache. Is it a caffeine? I don't care what the definition is. I'm addicted to coffee, right? Because if I take it away, I'm going to have a bad result and I'm not going to like it. And I'm going to go, I need coffee. Sugar's the same way. And even if you don't view it that way as like, I'm going to eat it out of a bag, your body knows, right? Like you stop taking out these processed foods, your body goes, I want chocolate, or I crave this, or I crave a donut, or I crave cake. It's not the fat, right? Nobody's going, oh my gosh, I just need butter right now. No, they need the sugar. And it's mind blowing that we then get up here and say, you're not addicted to sugar. Sugar's okay. Eat the donut if you want to. Just make sure you restrict your calories. Everybody be healthy. And oh wait, we're about 50% obesity in this country.
Yeah, I think going off of that, talking about don't eat sugar out of a bag, like what's candy then? Because it's literally sugar in a bag. Like you're eating Sour Patch Kids, that's just sugar in a bag. Like you can't tell me like because they add some food coloring, a little bit of water, a little bit of gelatin that it's not straight sugar, because it is. Or donuts, they cover it in powdered sugar and they put it in a bag. You're eating sugar in a bag. Like you can't, whether that's your argument, that is silly. Like I don't have like anything else to say. Like that's such an addiction. And like I think not only is the sugar itself such an addictive thing, but like the act of going into that like binge eating or like overeating and overindulging becomes so addictive. And I know for me, I don't know if you're religious, but I personally am a Christian, and I know that I was idolizing food. I was idolizing this food, and it was ruining my life. Like all I thought about was, when's the next time I'm going to do this? I want to go stop at at this little buy a candy bar. I want to do, not actually candy bars, but like I was eating protein bars, but they're basically the same thing. And I would buy like those which had sugar in them, or this and that, and like get something that had the sweet, or like those Celsius drinks. I can't even believe that I drank those at one point in my life and thought that they were healthy. Like sucralose is so scary. So scary. And people they just, same thing, turn a blind eye. UCI Integrative Health Center just, not just about this time last year, posted a study about heart disease and actually how much worse it is to have inflammation from artificial sweeteners like sucralose and aspartame than it is to have regular sugar. So I'm not saying that you should have regular sugar, but these artificial chemicals, they're horrible. They're absolutely horrible.
That's what people don't understand. If I have a choice, I will choose, if I have to, I have a gun in my head, I would choose a regular Coke versus a Diet Coke. And people are so hung up on the calories. They're like, but the Diet Coke's healthier, has no calories. I'm like we're so wrapped up in calories.
Crazy.
Like calories is the only thing, which is how we get, like I just did a video on another guy who has 1.5 million followers. And he was showing you all of these alternatives to help you lose weight. And they're all just reduced fat, right? 0% fat yogurt, reduced fat cheese, lower fat beef, like all of this stuff. Like beef's a little bit different because it's not removing the fat. It's just literally putting less of it in it. But all of these things, and I'm like, the moment that happens, other stuff goes in. Like nobody just goes, I'm going to remove some of the fat and leave it as is. No, because that's where most of the flavor comes from. So now I'm going to add stuff back into it. And that's exactly what it is. It's the chemicals. Like it's mind blowing to me that we're just totally okay with it. I get like we have so many environmental toxins that at some point you just have to go, like it is what it is. But to be actively promoting these things as healthy,
yeah, it's wrong.
It's just, I don't get it.
It's wrong. It's like, I think it's sourced from evil, and it's not so bad. And it's sad that they're promoted as health foods too. It's just mind-boggling that people even fall for it or believe it, or they just don't look. Which, I mean, maybe there was one point in my life where I didn't even look because I didn't know better. And you kind of have to have this, either someone in your life that's teaching you to know better, or you have to figure out, I gotta know better. So you have to be looking at labels, looking at all the ingredients. Yeah, you can't go around it. You can't skip it. That's just the way it is. I can't talk. It's the society that we live in. We have to look at ingredients. We have to be careful. Personally, I try not to eat anything out of a bag. I get my fruit and I get steak, ground beef. That's it.
Yeah, and the the people that do get demonized, your Eddie Aboos out there that say eat whole foods. Like how we're demonizing somebody that just says eat single ingredient foods. That's it.
No,
But
it's
anyway,
crazy.
at the risk of this going on forever,
Yeah.
I want. Where can people find you? This has been fascinating. I love the science aspect of it.
Hmm.
In addition to the fact that you also have like an anecdotal story to back it up, which I think
Oh,
is
thank you.
phenomenal. So where can people find you on social media to follow you and see more of your stuff?
Yeah, check out my page. It's the Wellness Kitchen on Instagram and TikTok. On Instagram, there's 3 S's in wellness. On TikTok, it's just normal. I'm hopefully going to be trying to start a podcast pretty soon, getting some other PIs that I've either worked for or worked under. I'd love to get Dr. Kong to like talk about this and learn from her too. I think that we have some good questions for her. I'll have to like have you send me some questions too, so we can really get all the answers.
Absolutely, because it's a lot of people just don't know. Like we don't understand the science behind a lot of this and how much variation there is and how much we don't know. So I think it's awesome to get people like that. So I really appreciate you being on. I appreciate everybody who listened in. Go give Emma a follow. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.